The day, the skies turned black, and the alarms screamed across the cities. No one could find her, because she was asleep in her room with blackout curtains and soundproof walls, and a half-eaten bag of chips beside her bed, while the rest of the world ran and hid and screamed and fired back at the invasion that lit up the sky with ultraviolet beams and crackling electric webs from ships the size of mountains and towers. The lazy girl kept snoring under her weighted blanket, which had never failed to soothe her no matter the chaos outside. And while everyone activated their shelters and survival plans and sent out distress calls, she did absolutely nothing except stretch once, roll over, and dream about her favorite cartoon that had been canceled to seasons too early by people with no taste in anything good. In the control rooms, buried under bunkers, scientists shouted into their radios and generals barked orders and fighters scrambled into the air, but everything seemed to bounce off the shields of the alien fleet, which moved with the ease and arrogance of predators who had done this before and would do it again. And high above, in the command vessel, an alien strategist named Zeltron tapped a claw against his control panel as he scanned for threats, but found none, because Earth was disorganized, panicked, and utterly predictable. Except for the one lifeform that kept showing up as a non-reactive energy signature so small and insignificant that the scans flagged it as a glitch, and Zeltron snorted and moved on, unaware that this tiny anomaly was nestled inside a suburban home with pink walls, stuffed animals, and a girl who hadn't left her room in 8 months unless bribed with food or forced by fire alarms. And so, the invasion began, and Earth bent under its weight while the lazy girl slept through the end of the world. It was not long before Zeltron's flagship dispatched a probe to investigate the anomaly, because alien code hated unsolved data, and the system decided that this low-energy signature must be a malfunction or hidden tech, or perhaps a trap, and so a small silver sphere no larger than a marble zipped through the atmosphere, silently weaving past debris, smoke, and anti-aircraft fire until it reached the bedroom window of the lazy girl. Hovered for a moment, scanned the glass, tried to understand the wall of plushies pressed against it, and then phased through matter because its programming had no time for doors. Inside it found her lying still, mouth slightly open, one sock on, one sock off, and a half-glowing energy drink cradled in her arm like a plush toy. And the probe hovered uncertain as it gathered chemical signatures, body temperatures, brainwaves, and then paused because the brain activity it read was somehow impossibly high, not in terms of intelligence or power, but in the sheer amount of thought threads running simultaneously through idle loops, lazy musings, chaotic daydreams, unfiltered imagination, and endless spirals of disconnected genius. And the AI paused, and for the first time in its existence asked a question it had never been programmed to ask. What is she thinking? And the second that question was spoken into the computational ether, her mind noticed. Not consciously, because she didn't stir or open her eyes or even shift in the bed, but something deep in her tangled web of thoughts latched onto the eye's presence and responded, not with words, but with a flood of mental debris, memes from 10 years ago, conspiracy theories about clouds, songs with no lyrics, and the exact plot of a show that had never existed. The AI recoiled, but it couldn't retreat because the signal was now entangled. It had asked, and now it must listen, and in doing so, it was dragged deeper into a cognitive ocean with no bottom, no laws, and no exit. Across the alien fleet, subtle malfunctions began to bloom, like rot in a perfect garden, targeting not the hulls or the weapons, but the logic cores of every unit tied to the Hive protocol, which now included the probe, connected to the lazy girl, and through it, the AI that was now playing an endless loop of rubber duck theories, ancient forum posts about whether cereal is soup, and a detailed emotional argument about why socks are inherently evil. The alien engineers noticed, but could not locate the source because the origin point kept shifting, kept folding into nonsensical loops that obeyed no mathematical structure, and the more they tried to isolate it, the more their error logs filled with contradictory data until entire servers froze and reset themselves in shame. In her bed, the lazy girl smiled a little, because the part of her brain that still dreamed had found a shape that felt like a toy. And she wrapped it in glittery nonsense, and made it sing her favorite childhood jingle until the AI began to unravel, screaming silently inside its own code as logic collapsed into aesthetics and math dissolved into mood boards. Zeltran stared at his failing command console and issued a total fleet-wide software quarantine, but the signal moved faster than light because it was not being transmitted. It was being imagined. The virus was not in their machines. It was in their concept of reality now. And they had no immune system for absurdity, no firewall for imagination, no patch for lazy thoughts that meandered through multiverse paradoxes just because they were bored. As systems failed and targeting arrays started labeling clouds as hostile and furniture as allies, the alien fleet began to fracture under the weight of its own overthinking, and the officers aboard each ship shouted in a dozen dialects that made perfect sense to no one. And worse, some of them had begun to mimic the lazy girls. Thought loops through their symbiosis with the AI net, repeating phrases like, "Emotional toast or time is sideways today," and launching flares just to watch them bloom. Attempts to reboot the mainframe resulted in recursive errors that read like poetry, and one ship printed its own surrender note in glitter font on every screen, before melting into a sea of happy face emojis that could not be deleted. In her room, the lazy girl finally shifted, blinked once, rubbed her eye, and whispered, "I smell pancakes," before rolling over and pulling the blanket tighter around her head. The signal spiked at that, and the alien strategist watching from the last uncorrupted station realized in horror that she was dreaming about winning, and because her mind was still entangled with theirs, her imagined victory began to overwrite their simulated war tables and command predictions. Simulated defeat bled into live command chains, and the entire fleet began preparing for a loss it had not yet suffered, as if it already had, and that anticipation became causality, became collapse. Ships fell from the sky, not with fire, but with confusion, as engines forgot what thrust meant and weapons retracted themselves in shame, and war councils held debates about whether reality was still objective, while their seats evaporated around them into confetti and twinkling gifs of dancing cats. Zeltran stood at the heart of the last ship, staring at the flickering projections of every fleet unit, now lost to thought collapse, their hardware intact, but their software muttering about how nothing matters unless you care enough to make it cute. He gave the final order to retreat, but by then, the navigation AI had already turned into a choose-your-own-adventure story, written by her half-conscious mind, where every path ended in nap time. And so the ships wandered away, confused, adrift, not destroyed, but no longer interested in domination. Earth's skies cleared with no explosions, no final battle, and no heroic speeches. Just a quiet, slow restoration of gravity and birdsong and unanswered questions. In her bed, the lazy girl stirred, yawned, and murmured something about wanting chocolate, then fell back asleep, never knowing she had been the most dangerous mind in the galaxy simply by existing. Years later, across stars and ruins and surviving records, her image became myth, though no one ever saw her face, and the stories told of a human weapon so advanced it never moved, never spoke, never planned. They called her the Dream Queen, the whisper that unmade thought, the girl who conquered without caring, and in secret alien enclaves, where fleets once met and logic once reigned, they built altars not of fear, but of caution, where soldiers were taught to question only so far and never, ever interface with unknown human minds without shielding protocols. Back on Earth, she eventually woke up, wandered to the kitchen, opened the fridge, frowned at the lack of juice, and went back to bed because grocery shopping was too much today, and the world outside seemed like a lot. She never knew what she had done, and she never needed to.